Before we start, just a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. Only 2% are subscribed at 1,000 subscribers. I'll be posting a special video. I lifted his pillow with one hand and grabbed the notebook with the other. I am Lily, 32, and I knew exactly how wrong that move was. The shower ran down the hall, steady and loud enough to hide paper sounds. I told myself I was just checking, not spying, and my fingers still shook. This is the moment where my life splits into before and after. The cover bent easier than I expected, like it had done this a lot. For a second I just stared at it open in my hands, pulse thudding hard. I knew I could still shut it, slide it back, pretend curiosity never won. Instead I flipped to the ribbon mark and saw his handwriting fill the page. Have you ever watched your own trust crumble line by line before you even read? His writing slanted across the paper, rushed but still very him. A few sentences about work hit my eyes first, nothing special or exciting. I skimmed fast, looking for my name like pulling off a bandage. Every line I jumped over felt like I was digging deeper into something ugly. I already hated the version of me who kept reading, and I still kept going. There it was, halfway down, not dramatic or underlined or anything. I hate my wife so much right now. 5 words and some extra poison, written in his neat, careful letters. My hands went numb, like my skin quit before my brain caught up. I read it again just to be sure I was not inventing it. You know that feeling when your stomach drops but you are still standing? I had that plus a weird hot ringing in my ears. Part of me tried to bargain on the spot, like maybe this was a joke. Maybe a writing prompt, maybe a quote from some podcast, maybe anything except real. The rest of me already believed it because something in me had suspected. I forced myself to look at the date in the corner, tiny and precise. Last week, same night, we ate takeout and argued about a stupid show. We had shared dessert and laughed at a commercial after that fight. He hugged me in the kitchen that night and brushed my hair back. Apparently at some point around that he also sat down and wrote that sentence. I flipped my thumb up the edge of the pages, hoping for context. Above it, he had scribbled about being tired of repeating himself at home. Below it there were more words, but my vision blurred too much to track them. I caught phrases like trapped and noise in my head, then everything scattered. If I kept reading, I felt like I might actually throw up. Water pounded in the pipes, then shifted, and my body reacted before my mind. I snapped the notebook closed so quick the cover slapped my wrist. My heart started sprinting, not just beating, full panic drill inside my chest. I slid it back under his pillow, fingers clumsy, almost dropping it on the floor. The shower was still running, but now every second felt borrowed. I sat on the edge of the bed and tried to look normal. Hands flat on my thighs, breathing in shallow bursts, eyes fixed on nothing. I practiced a neutral face like I was going to an audition, not a marriage. It felt insane to sit 5 inches above that notebook like nothing changed. I kept hearing that line in a loop, louder than the water. The shower cut off and the silence after felt thick and sharp. I heard the curtain slide, then cabinet doors bump, small familiar noises. My first instinct was to put the pillow back exactly how it had been. I fluffed it once and stopped, terrified I would overcorrect the shape. This is how far down you go when you cross a line like that. He walked in, rubbing his hair with a towel, humming some stupid tune. I watched him like a stranger, noticing every calm move, every soft habit. He crossed the room, kissed my forehead, and asked how my afternoon went. His breath was warm and casual on my skin, like nothing in his head had exploded. Mine had, but I heard my voice answer with some vague comment about errands. He dropped the towel on the chair and started digging for clean clothes. My eyes kept drifting to the pillow, sure it would somehow give me away. He tossed a shirt toward the bed and missed, and I flinched hard. "What was that?" he laughed, bending to pick it up, eyes curious now. I shrugged and made up some story about a weird notification earlier. We moved through the evening like any regular night, at least from outside. He joked during dinner and told me a short story about someone at work. I laughed on cue, fork steady in my hand, voice almost normal to my ears. Inside, every sound from him had a new caption, like, "This man hates you sometimes." I answered his questions and wondered if he could see every lie on my face. Later, he scrolled his phone while we half-watched a show on the couch. His feet ended up in my lap like always, heavy and warm and familiar. I rested my hand on his ankle, mostly so it would stop shaking. He leaned his head back and closed his eyes for a second, looking peaceful. All I could picture was him bent over that notebook, carving out that sentence. When he laughed at something on the screen, I watched his mouth closely. That same mouth had kissed me goodbye before work on the day he wrote it. It hit me that I could not match his outside mood to his inside words anymore. That mismatch scared me more than the hate itself, like reality suddenly glitched. How many other nights had he carried thoughts I would never know about? In bed, I lay on my side facing him, pretending to scroll. He talked about weekend plans, asked if we should invite friends over. I agreed too quickly, hoping he did not hear the strain under my voice. Every time he shifted, the mattress dipped near that hidden notebook. It felt like we were both sleeping above a landmine we never acknowledged. When his breathing finally slowed into sleep, I watched him in the dark. His face looked relaxed and honestly kind, which messed with my head. People who hate you should look different, right? Sharper somehow, colder somehow. He looked like the same man who fixed small things around the house without complaining. I caught myself almost crying out of confusion more than pain. Lying there, I argued with myself in circles, and none of it helped. On one side, I had privacy, his right to vent somewhere safe and unfiltered. On the other, I had that line, direct and personal and hard to minimize. I told myself everyone thinks terrible thoughts sometimes and never voices them. I also knew he chose to write this one down where it could live. I promised myself one thing before I finally drifted off in short bursts. I would not confront him yet, not without understanding more of that page. At the same time, I swore I would not open that notebook again. Both vows sat in my chest together, contradicting each other and still feeling true. Looking back now, that was the clearest sign I was already hooked. Sometime around 3 in the morning, I woke up to him turning over. His arm slid around my waist automatically, like muscle memory, pulling me closer. My body relaxed into him out of habit, even while my thoughts clenched. If he could hold me like that and still write those words, nothing was simple. I stared into the dark and realized this would not stay a secret for long. I pulled his diary out again the next morning, no hesitation this time. He had just backed the car out of the driveway, engine fading down the street. My pulse climbed anyway, like he might walk right back in mid-page. I opened to the same spot as before and forced my eyes lower. If I stopped now, I knew my brain would invent something worse. The date above that ugly line hit me first, small and precise. 7 days earlier. Same evening we joked about dinner plans and fell asleep touching feet. Seeing that number turned the whole thing from random rage into a record. I felt stupid for not feeling that punch the first time. Under the phrase about hating me, there were more cramped lines. I had skimmed past them before, my vision doing that panic blur. Now I locked in and read each word slowly like a threat. Feels like I talked to a wall at home sat there next. That one landed almost as hard because I heard my own voice in it. He had listed moments from that day like evidence for a trial. Asked her to talk about money, she brushed it off with a joke. Shared that I felt drained, she changed the topic to a podcast. Every bullet point carried my name without using it, and I recognized them. I also remembered completely different reasons for every move he recorded. My brain jumped straight into defense mode, loud and fast. I worked late that day. I was stressed about my own stuff and tried to keep it light. In my head, those jokes were attempts to keep us from spiraling. On his page, they looked like proof I treated him like background noise. That gap between our versions of the same night rattled me hard. It was like seeing two security tapes of one argument that did not match. Both felt true and unfair at the same time, which is exhausting. I caught myself mouthing excuses into the empty room just to stay upright. Even then, I kept my fingers on the paper instead of closing it. I flipped back a few entries, curious and scared in equal measure. Earlier pages had shorter thoughts, quick blurts about random annoyances and wins. Then about a month before the hate comment, the tone shifted completely. He started rating days out of 10 for us in the margin. That little scale hit harder than the words for some reason. One entry read, "Today with L, 3 out of 10 connection." Under that he wrote, "We watched a show together but barely talked." Another spot said, "Argument over chores again, 0 out of 10 tonight." The numbers stacked like a falling score, dropping more than climbing. I felt this weird mix of guilt and irritation rising in my chest. A petty part of me thought I should start my own scoring system. I pictured writing "Today with him, 4 out of 10 effer." I hated that thought the second it appeared, because it proved something. We were both already tallying wins and losses, just in different places. He used paper, I used an invisible list in my head. Halfway down one page, I hit a new detail that froze me. "Talked to Jay during lunch, first time someone actually asked how I was." No full name, just that one letter sitting there like a secret. I searched the surrounding lines for more hints and found a few. "She noticed I was off before I said anything," sat in the next sentence. My jaw clenched so tight my teeth hurt. I did not remember noticing anything on that date at all. I tried to remember what I had been doing at noon that day. Probably scrolling through my own messages or rushing something at work. The idea of him opening up to some mystery, Jay, hit me sideways. I kept reading because of course I did, curiosity fully in charge now. He mentioned Jay again on the following Tuesday, almost casually this time. Quick chat with Jay, felt heard for 5 minutes at least. 5 minutes. I stared at that number like it was an accusation carved into me. This is where I wish I could tell you I closed the book. That I respected some boundary and dealt with it like an adult. Instead I dug deeper, nails pressing into my palm as if that helped. I flipped to the most recent page, the one from the previous night. My name sat right at the top, underlined once. "Trying to decide if I can keep living like this," started the entry. My stomach twisted so hard I had to stand up for a second. He had written about putting on a normal face around me at dinner. He described me laughing at a meme I showed him on my phone. Under that he scribbled, "I feel like I'm watching my life through glass." I wanted to throw the whole thing across the room at that line. Instead I placed it flat on the bedspread, fingers spread on the cover. I heard myself mutter, dramatic, much like some bitter narrator over his thoughts. Then the guilt rolled in again, because apparently I never stopped layering it. I hated how quickly I shifted from hurt to sarcasm and back. Noise outside snapped me out of my spiral like a slap. A car door shut somewhere near the house, way too loud. My heart leaped straight into my throat before my brain bothered checking details. I slammed the diary closed and shoved it under the pillow again. Only after that did I peek through the curtain and see a delivery truck. Standing there, breathing like I had sprinted upstairs, I realized something stupid. I was more afraid of him catching me reading than of him leaving. That thought sat heavy because it meant I already assumed he might go. I turned back toward the bed and the pillow looked different now. Like both of us had hidden too much under there for way too long. I pulled the pillow up again, slower this time but still deliberate. "If you are judging me right now, trust me, I already beat you to it." I opened the book near the middle, looking for the first mention of Jay. There it was, tucked into a short paragraph about a work training day. "Met Jay during a group exercise, she called me out on something important." He had written, "She noticed I agreed with everyone and then looked exhausted. Then she asked what I actually wanted to say instead of nodding along." Reading that hurt in a different way, because I recognized that pattern. He nodded at me a lot too, even when he disagreed. I just always took that as support, not as silence. Entry by entry, Jay's presence grew in scattered notes that day. He used phrases like "good conversation" and "rare honesty" when he mentioned her. Nothing romantic on the page, nothing flirty, nothing overtly messy yet. Still, the contrast between his detailed reflections with her and his lines about me stung. With me he wrote numbers and frustration, with her he wrote questions and insight. At some point my hand went for my phone almost on its own. I opened our chat history from the day he met her and scrolled. Most of my messages were quick updates and links, short check-ins. His responses were emojis and single words, like he was half elsewhere. Knowing where that elsewhere probably was made my chest feel oddly hollow. I kept switching between the diary and my phone like a stupid detective. Look at his entry. Look at my text from that hour. Try to line them up and see where the cracks actually formed. It felt obsessive, I know, but once you start matching timelines, you cannot stop. As I read, one line near the bottom of a page hooked me hard. Homework from Jay's workshop, write everything I never say out loud. So this was not only venting. He had turned our life into some kind of structured assignment. That somehow made the harsh phrases feel sharper, not safer. The clock on the nightstand caught my eye and made my stomach lurch. He would be home in under an hour if his schedule stayed normal. I closed the cover and kept my hand on it. A few seconds. I actually whispered, "I get it, but damn," into the empty room. Then I put it back again, careful now out of habit rather than respect. For the rest of the afternoon, I moved around the house on autopilot. Every little task came with a second-channel commentary I could not mute. Folding laundry turned into, "He thinks you ignore him when you do this." Loading the dishwasher turned into, "He probably tracked this as a fight day." By the time his car pulled in, my nerves felt like stripped wires. He walked in carrying his bag over one shoulder, eyes tired but easy. "Hey," he greeted me, dropping his keys in the bowl by the door. My own "hey" came out thinner than usual, and I saw his brow crease. He studied my face for a beat too long, like he sensed static. I forced a smile and asked some basic question about his meetings to deflect. During dinner, my attention sat mostly on his phone within reach. Whenever it buzzed, he glanced at it, then flipped it face down again. Before all this, I would not have thought twice about that tiny move. Now every notification felt like a possible message from a woman whose name I barely knew. Or did not know at all yet, technically, just a single letter and my own paranoia. At one point his screen lit up and stayed bright a little longer. He tapped quickly, lips pressing together in a way I recognized as focus. I heard myself ask, "Who is that?" in the most casual tone I could fake. "Work person," he replied, locking the phone and looking back at his plate. The phrase "work person" landed somewhere between harmless and loaded in my chest. I studied his face while he ate, searching for guilt or excitement. He just looked worn out and half distracted, like many other evenings. That actually scared me more, because it meant nothing outward had changed much. All the real movement was happening in his notes and inside my head. Out loud we sounded fine, but inside we were already 3 steps into disaster. That night, once he fell asleep, I lay awake staring at the ceiling again. Instead of replaying the original hateful phrase, my mind ran through the ratings. 3 out of 10. 0 out of 10. Mystery J getting rare honesty, while I got checklists of my worst versions. I realized I had a choice coming in soon. Keep creeping through his private thoughts until I memorized every wound. Or stop and actually ask him if he still wanted to be married to me. Neither option felt safe, both threatened whatever stability we still had. I remember thinking very clearly that the next time I opened that diary would blow everything up. I scooped up his phone the second the shower started. Lock screen already open. He had just checked a notification and left it on the sink. My thumb hovered for half a breath, then I hit the messages icon. I knew I had crossed a second line and still kept going. A thread near the top had just one letter and a period. J. My chest punched out another heartbeat when I tapped it. The most recent text sat at the bottom, short and direct. Supervision later, I want to follow up on yesterday. Supervision. My brain caught that word in a weird way, like it came with a highlighter. The bubble above it was his. "Yeah, need it." Yesterday shook me more than I expected. The timestamp matched the day of one of those low scores in his journal. I scrolled up 3 messages, then 5, then 10. They talked about clients, boundaries, burnout, the usual therapy buzzwords. Buried between them were sharper lines that hit closer to home. "Your resentment sounds old, not just about this week. Have you told her any of this out loud?" He answered, "Not really." She goes defensive, then I drop it. Seeing that written to someone else felt like a slap straight to my ego. The next line from Jay made my throat tighten. "Then you're not married to her, you're married to the version in your head." I actually whispered "wow" at the sink like a random bystander. That sentence dug under my skin faster than anything he had written. Because it was about me but not from him, and somehow that stung worse. I scrolled higher, looking for some hook that made this less awful. Instead, I hit the top of the thread and saw her full name. Jenna Morales LCSW. Professional title right there, screaming legitimate and messy in one line. So Jay was not some vague crush from a bar or a gym. She was another therapist, complete with license and insight and way too much access. Knowing that did not relax me, it just changed the shape of the threat. Water pounded through the wall, louder for a second, warning me. I flipped the phone back to the home screen and set it down. My fingers left faint smudges on the edge and I wiped them fast. I stared at my reflection in the mirror, eyes wide, jaw pulled tight. I looked like someone caught in a lie, which was not wrong. He called out something over the running water, voice muffled by the door. R said my vocal cords to work. Yeah, I'm here came out a little too bright. I backed out of the bathroom like the phone might confess on its own. My heart thumped so hard I felt it in my throat. In the hallway I paused, listening to the spray die down. I felt like I was holding 3 different versions of him in my head. The one who joked at dinner. The one who wrote those harsh lines. And now the one who poured his inner mess into texts with Jenna. I walked to the bedroom and sat on the edge of the mattress. The journal under his pillow suddenly felt like the second device in a crime scene. Part of me wanted to grab it too, stack both on my lap. Part of me knew I was already way past any moral high ground. I chose the short-term hit and pulled the pillow up anyway. The book slid into my palm like it had been waiting. I flipped straight to a recent day, not even pretending to hesitate. New entry. Fresh ink. Halfway down the page I saw her name again, this time spelled out. Jenna pushed me hard today, started the line that grabbed me. She said my anger at Elle is safer than telling her the truth. I read it twice, then a third time, brain flipping between fury and shame. I wanted to argue with a stranger I had never met and also with myself. Because deep down I knew I did shut him down sometimes. Under that he had written about almost canceling their next meeting. Feels dangerous letting someone walk around inside my marriage like this. Then another sentence. Feels even more dangerous not having anyone see what's actually going on. That one lodged itself in my ribs and refused to move. Footsteps hit the hallway and my reflexes finally kicked in. I closed the book and shoved it back into its hiding spot. By the time he stepped into the doorway, I had a laundry basket in my hands. Busy morning I threw out, head buried in folded shirts. He leaned against the frame, watching me longer than usual. You okay? He asked, brow pulled together. I nodded and held up a pair of socks like some kind of proof. Just trying to get ahead of chores, you know how it piles up. His gaze flicked to the bed for a fraction of a second. I felt my stomach dip, almost convinced he could see fingerprints in the sheets. He crossed the room and brushed my shoulder with his knuckles. You seem a little wired, came out softer than I expected. I gave this half laugh that sounded completely fake to my own ears. Too much coffee, I threw out, picking the safest lie I could invent. He studied my face, then let it go, and that almost hurt more. We moved into the kitchen, the air between us slightly off. He filled a glass with water and stared at nothing in particular. Out of nowhere he spoke again, words dropping heavy in the quiet. We have a professional development day coming up, big training thing. I pretended to focus on the counter while my whole body synced to that sentence. Anything interesting? I asked, aiming for casual and landing near shaky. He rotated the glass between his palms, eyes on the surface. Some colleague of mine is leading a workshop on burnout and relationships. Pause. Jenna, the one I mentioned a while back. There it was out loud. First time I had heard her name in real time. I grabbed onto the detail about the workshop like a handle. She must be good if they asked her to run that came out too fast. Inside the words, she must be good with you, chased the rest. He shrugged with one shoulder, mouth pulling in a tight line. Yeah, she's sharp, kind of intense. His fingers drummed once on the counter, then flattened again. She kind of calls me out on stuff I normally dodge. He tried to sound annoyed, but something warmer slid underneath. A small ugly fear flickered up my spine. Not full-blown physical affair fear, a different kind. Emotional reliance. Someone else getting the parts of him I used to see without effort. The comparison tasted bitter even in my thoughts. I tested the ground a little just to see where it cracked. "So you two are pretty close then," slipped out with what I hoped was curiosity. He stiffened almost imperceptibly, then relaxed on purpose like he caught himself. "We work together, we talk, it's not a big deal," he tossed back. The "not a big deal" sounded rehearsed, which of course made it a huge deal. For a few beats we just stood there, locked in this weird stalemate. I wanted to yell, "I read every word you wrote," across the room. I also wanted to burn that journal and pretend none of this existed. Instead, I grabbed a dish and started rinsing it with too much focus. He watched my hands, jaw tightening just enough to notice. "She keeps telling me I need to be more honest at home," he added. The phrase sliced through the clatter of running water with surgical precision. I turned the faucet off and faced him fully, heart pounding against my ribs. "And what's stopping you?" came out low and rough before I could soften. Tay. His eyes flickered like I had hit a nerve he wasn't ready for. He looked away first, focusing on a random spot near the window. "I don't know how to start that without it blowing up," came after a breath. I felt my throat get tight because he was right, and I hated that. Any serious talk between us had turned into a clash lately. I realized we were both tiptoeing around the same explosion from opposite sides. I grabbed a towel and dried my hands just to do something. "You think silence is working better?" I asked, forcing my voice steady. He let out a short, humorless laugh and shook his head once. "No, I'm just used to it," dropped out, sharper than his usual tone. That answer left a bruise I could actually feel. The rest of the morning passed in these small, jagged exchanges. Nothing big enough to classify as a fight, nothing soft enough to reassure. Every time his phone buzzed, I tried not to flinch or stare. Every time he caught me glancing at it, he locked the screen faster. We were both broadcasting anxiety in different channels and pretending it was fine. When he finally left for that training day, the house went too quiet. I paced from the hallway to the bedroom, then back again. I could hear my own socks brushing the floor and it annoyed me. The urge to look at the journal one more time scraped at my nerves. I told myself no, then yes, then no again like some twisted chant. Eventually, I yanked the pillow up with more force than necessary. The book slid out and hit the mattress with a dull thump. I opened to a random page closer to the present, not the older stuff. New entry from the night before. That kitchen conversation stared back at me. First line hit harder than any of the ratings from earlier entries. "Jenna thinks I'm halfway out of this marriage already, and she's not wrong." I felt heat rush from my chest up into my face in one wave. He had written about imagining an apartment alone, quiet after long days. He described coming home and not having to perform being okay. Then he added, "I don't know how to tell Elle that without destroying her." That part twisted my insides in a way I was not ready for. Because it meant he still cared about me enough to worry. But also not enough to stay without fantasizing about leaving. I read the lines again, fingers pressing into the page until they hurt. It felt like holding both my own obituary and a weird kind of compliment. Further down, he had scribbled a small note in the corner. "Plan for tomorrow, try to bring up counseling without making it sound like blame." So he had a script forming in his head for us, not just for her. I traced the word counseling with my thumb, chewing the inside of my cheek. I had imagined a confrontation today, not a plan from his side first. Looking back, this is the moment I almost changed the ending. If I had waited for him to ask for help, maybe we could have met there. Instead, I slammed the journal closed and felt something in me harden. I was tired of reading my own life in his private notes and secret threads. I decided the next conversation would not happen in his head or on that page. "So did Jenna teach you how to leave me today?" That was the first thing out of my mouth when he stepped inside. I still had my hand on the doorknob, fingers stiff from gripping it. His body halted mid-step, one shoe on the mat, one on the floor. For a second his face went completely blank and my gut flipped. He set his bag down slowly, eyes locked on mine now. Wow came out of him first, sharp and almost amused. Then his eyebrows pulled together in this confused knot I recognized. Where is that coming from? Landed heavier, more careful than usual. I felt my heartbeat climb into my neck, but I refused to back up. I folded my arms so he would not notice how much I trembled. You keep mentioning her, plus this big relationship thing at work. I tipped my head slightly, like it was just curiosity, not accusation. Kind of hard not to picture you two fixing your lives without me. There it was, jealous and petty and very real. He dropped his keys into the dish hard enough to make a sharp click. She's a trainer, not my secret girlfriend, came out with clipped words. My stomach twisted anyway at the phrase secret girlfriend because he said it. Do you actually think I'm cheating, or are we doing something else here? He planted his hands on his hips, watching me closely for tells. I hated that he could read my micro expressions while I read his pages. I think you're unloading on a colleague about our marriage instead of me. The sentence shot out before I could pretty it up or soften it. His mouth parted just slightly, like I had stepped on something sensitive. That was my first small win, and I am not proud of enjoying it. She's a therapist, it's literally her job to talk about this stuff. He ran a palm over his face, dragging it down slow. I go to her for consultation, not emotional adultery, he added, eyes pinched. I flinched at that phrase because emotional adultery sounded way too close. Also because he had just approached the edge of the real truth without knowing. I leaned against the wall, needing something solid behind my back. Fine, consultation, I echoed, letting the word hang between us longer. Are you consulting about how much you can't stand being married to me? I watched his jaw lock, the muscle twitching near his ear in tight rhythm. That twitch always meant he felt cornered, and I had shoved him there. He stayed quiet long enough that my own courage started leaking away. Then he inhaled once deeper, maybe counting in his head like they teach. Sometimes I talk about not recognizing us anymore, came out low, controlled. He glanced at me, then down at the floor, then back up again. I don't sit around trashing you for entertainment if that's what you're picturing. That answer hit in two directions at once. Relief that he denied making fun of me, disappointment that he confirmed the distance. I pushed off the wall and stepped a little closer, testing the air. So who exactly does she think you are, this version you show her? My voice came out rougher than I wanted, and he caught it. He gave me a small humorless half smile, the one that means screw it. She thinks I'm exhausted and conflict avoidant and halfway checked out. His fingers tapped against his thigh once, then stilled by force. She also thinks I still care about this enough to be scared, he added. That last part slid into my chest and lodged there, buzzing. For a beat we just looked at each other, both breathing harder. I heard myself say, at least someone gets the full picture, before I could stop. I regretted it instantly, but it was already hanging between us. His eyes narrowed, not angry yet, more like he had spotted something off. Why do you sound like you've heard this before, he asked quietly. That question made my skin prickle. I realized how close I was to exposing everything, the reading, the spying. I forced a shrug, aiming for casual, landing somewhere near guilty instead. Because I feel that distance too, I live in this house also. It was not an answer, and we both knew it. He let it slide, or pretended to, which almost annoyed me more. He picked up his bag and moved toward the hallway, shoulders tight. I'm beat, today was intense, can we not do this at the door? He did not slam anything, but the tension followed him down the hall. I stood there alone, pulse racing, angry at both of us. I trailed after him a minute later because I could not leave it. He had dropped his jacket on the chair and was unbuttoning his cuff. We should see someone, I blurted, skipping every softer opener my brain suggested. His fingers froze on the button, and he turned slowly to face me. Someone like who, came out cautious, but there was a spark behind it. A couples counselor, not your work buddy, someone separate from all that. The words spilled faster once I started, like they had been waiting to escape. We are stuck, we keep circling the same arguments, it's not working. My throat constricted halfway through, which made the last part sound like a plea. I hated that vulnerability showed up right when I wanted to look strong. He searched my face like he expected a catch hidden under the offer. You really want that, or are you just trying to control the narrative? That question landed harder than I wanted to admit, because it was fair. I swallowed and held his gaze anyway, forcing myself not to look away. Both, I answered finally and watched his expression flicker at the honesty. He let out a breath short and rough, then dragged a hand through his hair. I have actually been thinking about that, he admitted, eyes darting aside. He shifted his weight like he was stepping onto fragile ground. I didn't know how to bring it up without you hearing it as blame. Hearing him say it out loud made that entry in his notebook echo. I leaned against the doorway now, needing something steady to press into. If you present it like I'm the whole problem, yeah, I react. I lifted my shoulders a bit, feeling exposed but going with it. If you say you're struggling and you want us to get help, I'll listen. My voice shook slightly, and I hoped he heard the difference. For a moment his face softened, then tightened right back up. Do you think you could actually own your part in there, he asked. I almost snapped that I always own things, then caught myself mid-impulse. Truth was, I often dodged my own flaws with jokes or changing topics. Yes, if you do the same, or we are wasting our time, I replied. He nodded once, slow, more to himself than to me. Okay, I know a few names, people who are not connected to my job. He pulled his phone from his pocket and unlocked it without hiding the screen. That tiny choice registered, even through all the line. He scrolled, thumb moving in quick, precise motions I had memorized. I watched from a few steps away, trying to look casual and failing. He opened his contacts and tapped a number that was not Jenna's. I checked. This one is good with couples in our situation, he explained, glancing up briefly. The phrase "our situation" sent another jolt through me, because it made it official. We were no longer just a rough patch, we were a case. Call now, I said, maybe too fast, like I feared he might reconsider. His eyebrows shot up, surprised by my urgency, but he hit the dial. While the line rang, he stared at the floor, shoulders squared. I realized I was holding my breath and forced myself to exhale quietly. I could hear my own pulse in my ears over the faint ringing. Voicemail kicked in, and he ended the call without leaving a message. I'll try again tomorrow, I don't want to dump this in a recording. He set the phone on the dresser and finally looked at me fully. Are you sure you want to do this with me, not against me? That last part came out softer, like he actually needed the answer. I stepped closer until we were almost touching and my chest hurt. I don't know how to be on your team while I'm this angry. I exhaled through my nose, felt my eyes sting, hated it. But I want us in the same room with someone who can translate. I meant translate all the things we had both hidden in separate places. His shoulders dropped a fraction, enough for me to see some weight shift. Okay, he repeated slower, like he was trying the word on. We'll lay it out, even the parts that make us look terrible. He searched my face again, like he needed one more confirmation nod. You ready for me to be that honest, though? That question sliced right through my bravado. Because I knew what he had already written when no one was listening. And he had no idea I had read it, which was its own landmine. I swallowed, felt my tongue stick to the roof of my mouth for a second. Yeah, I'm ready came out, and I knew it was only half true. He touched my arm lightly, quick contact, then dropped his hand again. I need a shower, I feel like I've been in other people's problems all day. He moved past me toward the bathroom, leaving a draft of tension trailing behind. I stayed rooted in place, staring at the spot where his phone lay. The urge to grab it again pulsed through me like a bad habit. I forced myself to step away instead, just to prove I still had some line. I went to the bedroom and straightened the bedding with sharp movements. I could feel the outline of his hidden notebook through the mattress as I smoothed it. Knowing what was inside it and what was coming in therapy twisted together. I knew sooner or later those two worlds would collide, and I would be the blast point. I gripped the doorknob to the counselor's office so hard my hand ached. Last chance to bail, I muttered, more to myself than to him. He stood beside me, jaw tight, one foot already angled toward the hallway. For a second I really thought he might turn around and leave. I pushed the door open before either of us could choose escape. We sat on the couch, just far enough apart to feel like strangers. He balanced his ankle on his knee, leg bouncing in quick bursts. I kept my hands locked together in my lap so they would not shake. The therapist introduced herself, calm voice, eyes moving between us. Tell me what brought you here today, she asked, and my pulse spiked. I stayed quiet, waiting to see how he would frame this. He cleared his throat, stared at the rug, then lifted his head. I feel disconnected at home, and I do not know how to fix it. He spoke slowly, like each word weighed something heavy. Hearing him say it out loud still hit me like a slap. The therapist nodded once, then turned to me. "How does that land for you?" she asked, hands resting loosely. I let out a short breath that sounded almost like a laugh. I knew things were off, but hearing him say disconnected makes my chest tighten. It came out more honest than I planned, which scared me a little. She watched me a second longer, then leaned back. "When did you both start feeling this distance grow?" she asked, voice steady. My brain flashed to the first time I opened his diary, but I lied. "Recently," I answered too fast, eyes dropping away. I felt his attention shift toward me, like he heard the dodge. He jumped in before she could probe that timeline. "For me, it has been building for a while now." He kept his gaze on the therapist, not on me. Lots of small moments where I tried to talk and then shut down. That last part sparked something defensive in my throat immediately. I turned toward him, eyebrows raised. "Tried to talk how?" I asked, biting down on my tone. He flicked his eyes at me, then back to her. I would hint that I felt overwhelmed, then crack a joke when she brushed it off. My cheeks heated because I could not deny that pattern. The therapist held up a hand slightly, slowing the spiral. "Right now I just want a rough picture," she said, still calm. "Not every detail yet, we have time for that if you both stay." The word "stay" landed with extra weight in the air. I knew she meant in the process, but my mind jumped to the marriage. She shifted her focus back to him first. "When you shut down at home, where do those feelings go instead?" His mouth twitched like he almost smiled at the question. "I write, I talk to colleagues, I keep most of it internal." That single word, "right," sent a jolt through my spine. The therapist latched onto that piece like she had radar. "Right how?" she asked, tilting her head a little. He took a breath and glanced at the ceiling. "I keep a journal, kind of a dump for things I do not say." My heart hammered harder because we were walking straight into it. She nodded again, no judgment in her expression. "Does your partner know that is where a lot of your emotions go?" His eyes slid toward me, then back to her. I mentioned journaling once or twice, nothing detailed. I felt my stomach clench because detailed was exactly what I had. Her gaze moved to me, assessing, curious. "How do you feel hearing that big emotions live on those pages?" I swallowed, throat dry, fingers digging into each other. "Honestly, it stings that they are safer there than with me." That part was true, even if it was not the whole truth. She watched my face closely, like she saw something more. "Do you two have agreements around privacy, phones, writing, that kind of thing?" I hesitated, and that pause said more than anything. He frowned slightly, eyes narrowing as he turned toward me. "Why are you pausing?" he asked, voice quieter now. I could feel the moment sliding out of my control. This was the exact cliff I had known we would reach eventually. I had promised myself I would tell him in this room, not at home. Actually doing it still felt like jumping with no ground visible. My tongue stuck for a second, then words pushed through anyway. "I read it," I blurted, staring at the therapist instead of him. The silence after that sentence pressed hard around my ears. His leg stopped bouncing so abruptly it almost shook the couch. "You did what?" Came out flat, not loud, which scared me more. I finally forced myself to look at his face. His expression was not dramatic, just stunned and narrowing. "The notebook under your pillow," I added, because there was no backing out. My fingers twisted together as I talked, nails pressing into skin. I opened it more than once and I saw things I cannot unsee. My voice thinned on the last words, shame burning hot in my chest. The therapist spoke before he did, which probably saved the furniture. "Okay, that is a lot, let's slow down for a minute." Her gaze moved between us, steady and focused. "How long have you known what is in there?" she asked me gently. I answered before I could overthink it and make it prettier. "A week and change," I said, blinking quickly. I read one line the first time, then kept going. I could feel his eyes on me like heat from a stove. The therapist turned to him, posture still calm but more alert. "What is happening for you hearing this right now?" she asked. He laughed once, a short disbelieving sound with no humor. "I feel exposed and stupid and incredibly angry." His hands clenched on his knees, knuckles pale, shoulders rigid. That was literally the only place I let myself say the worst thoughts. The way he said worst made my lungs tighten. He looked at me finally, eyes sharper than I had seen in months. You went through the one space that was not curated for you. Every word came out slow, almost measured, which somehow cut deeper. You read things not meant to be said out loud, then sat beside me in bed. That image alone made me want to crawl under the couch. I opened my mouth to defend myself, and the therapist raised her hand again. Hold on, both of you are flooding, we need to anchor. She turned to me first, maybe because I looked closer to crying. What led you to open it the very first time, not the second or third? That question hit exactly where I kept trying not to look. His whole vibe at home shifted, like the floor tilted. I knew I was repeating myself with that idea, but it was the truth. He was distant, kind, but somewhere else, and I could not name where. I rubbed my thumb over the side of my index finger, grounding myself. I told myself I was checking that we were okay, then I saw that line. He stiffened again, zeroed in. What line, he asked, dread creeping into his voice against his will. I exhaled slowly, staring at the rug between us. The one where you wrote that you hate your wife so much right now. Saying it out loud in front of a third person felt surreal. His head dropped for a moment, eyes closing as if he had been waiting. Of Curry. See, you found the worst possible sentence, he breathed out. He lifted his gaze again, pain and fury mixed in a way that unsettled me. That was one moment, not a press release about our relationship. He shook his head once, like he wanted to dislodge the entire situation. The therapist leaned slightly forward, voice still even. I am hearing two huge breaches colliding here. She counted them on her fingers, slow and deliberate. 1. Unfiltered rage written privately. 2. Secret access to that rage. Her eyes met mine again, not unkind but very direct. Do you regret reading it, separate from the information you got? The question felt like someone had opened a window in my chest. Yes and no, I answered because I was done playing saint. I hate that I crossed that boundary, it makes me feel small. I took a breath, pushed through the second part anyway. But if I had not, I would still think we just needed date nights. My voice sharpened there because that difference mattered to me. I would not know he had been picturing walking out. I flicked my gaze toward him, then back to her. I would still be joking my way around things he was quietly tallying. He made a low sound, somewhere between a groan and a curse. You also read things like me writing about my own fear. He lifted his hands, let them fall back down, frustrated. You grabbed the ugliest words and built your whole story around them. Hearing that forced me to see my own selective reading, which sucked. The therapist stepped in before we looped that particular fight all hour. Both of you focused on what confirmed your worst narrative. She looked at me. You saw hate and exit strategies and locked onto that. Then she turned to him. You saw invasion and control and locked onto that. She let the words sit there, grounded and simple. I am not saying either reaction is irrational, but neither is complete. Her tone did that thing where you feel checked without feeling attacked. It made it harder to cling to my favorite version of the story. She shifted her attention back to me. Does he know you also checked his messages, or is that new information too? My whole body flushed hot at once, like someone had cranked a dial. I glanced at him, then back at her, then down at my hands. I looked at one thread, I admitted, voice dropping lower. His chair scraped lightly as he jerked back a little. With who, he asked, even though I knew he already suspected the answer. I swallowed and forced myself to just say it. With Jenna, I replied, feeling my pulse hammer everywhere. Even the therapist's eyebrows lifted a fraction at that. He stared at me like I had grown another head. So you did not just come after her out of nowhere last night. His tone held more hurt than sarcasm, which made my chest feel tight. You knew exactly who she was to me before I ever explained it. He leaned back, hands now jammed under his arms like he needed restraint. I saw your conversations about burnout, about me, about you wanting honesty. The words tumbled out now that the dam had cracked. I watched you write vulnerable stuff to someone who was not in our house. I felt tears sting, which I hated, but they were there. It felt like you trusted her with the raw version and handed me leftovers. He pressed his lips together hard, then released them. She is part of my professional circle, not my secret emotional spouse. He rubbed his forehead in short, rough strokes, crackling with tension. Those talks existed because I was too scared to start this exact conversation. He gestured vaguely between us and the therapist, as if that proved his point. The therapist held up both hands slightly, containing the charge. Okay, we have journals, messages, resentment, spying, fear of conflict. Her summary was blunt, and it cleared some fog for me. What I need to know now is simple, not easy. She looked from him to me very deliberately. Are you here because you want to repair, or because you want clarity to leave? The question hung there longer than any silence earlier. He looked at his knees first, then exhaled hard and raised his eyes. I do not know if I can get back what we had, he said. But I do not want to walk away without trying something like this. I felt my throat close for a moment when I heard that. It was not a promise, but it was not a sentence either. She turned toward me, gaze steady. And you, she asked, giving me the same bare choice. I wiped under one eye quickly, annoyed with myself, then answered. I want a real shot at fixing this, not just rearranging the surface. My voice shook, but I kept it going. I also need to stop treating his inner life like evidence in a case. That part tasted bitter coming out because it forced me to admit my own damage. I cannot ask for honesty while hacking into every locked drawer. The therapist nodded slowly, absorbing that. Trust was already crawl. Seeked before the journal, the snooping just widened it. She folded her hands loosely, then spoke with more firmness. Here is what I will ask as a starting boundary. She turned to me first. No more looking at his writing or his phone without permission, full stop. The words landed heavy, but also weirdly relieving. I nodded once, more certain than I felt. Okay, I agreed, tasting the risk in that commitment. My brain immediately whispered, what if you miss the next bomb? She faced him next. And you do not weaponize your private thoughts in here by pretending they vanished. He frowned slightly, not following. You wrote about leaving, you wrote about hatred, those existed. Her tone stayed even, but did not let him slip past that part. He blew out a breath, shoulders dropping a few inches. I felt those things in flashes, not as a constant state. He rubbed his palms on his thighs, grounding himself. I was furious, hopeless, numb, all of it depending on the day. Then he looked directly at me. I did not tell you because I was afraid you would shatter or explode. Hearing that out loud stung and made sense at the same time. I could picture every moment I had melted down over smaller things. I stared at my hands, then up at him again. You never gave me the chance to maybe handle it differently, I replied. The therapist jumped on that thread. That is the experiment now, she said. He brings more of his truth to you, not just to pages and colleagues. She glanced my way. And you build tolerance for hard conversations without snooping for early warning. I nodded, though my stomach twisted at the idea of no more secret checks. Because here is the uncomfortable part. Spying had made me feel safer, even as it poisoned everything. It gave me the illusion of control, while eroding any actual intimacy. Letting that go felt like walking into traffic with my eyes open. She glanced at the clock, then back at us. For this week, I want one direct conversation at home, no mediator. Her gaze stayed on us until we both nodded. Something real, not logistics, 30 minutes where you say the hard thing kindly. My insides clenched because I knew exactly which topic would surface first. We walked out of that office in near silence, both wiped. In the elevator, he finally spoke, voice rough. So you read that I hated you and still asked for counseling. I looked at the closed doors, then at his reflection. I read everything and still showed up, that has to count for something. He studied me in the mirrored wall, expression softer and more wary. It counts, it also complicates the hell out of this. He shoved his hands into his pockets, shoulders hunched slightly. I do not know how long it will take to feel safe writing again. Those words hit me with a different kind of guilt than before. That night back home, I watched him head toward the bedroom. My chest tightened when he reached for his pillow out of habit. Instead of tucking anything underneath, he paused, then changed direction. He placed the journal on the nightstand, in full view, spine facing outward. I lay there later, eyes on that cover, wondering if I would ever touch it again. I set my phone on the coffee table and hit the timer. 30 minutes, no running away, this is our homework. He sank into the other end of the couch, shoulders lifted, arms folded. For a second neither of us spoke, the ticking sound louder than it should. I stared straight ahead and forced myself to open my mouth first. I want to use this time for one specific thing. He rubbed his thumb across his palm, eyes on the table edge. Of course you do, he muttered, but he did not get up. I took that as permission, thin as it was. I need to talk about what you wrote and what that means now. His gaze snapped to me, then down to the journal by his knee. Which part, he asked, though I knew he already guessed. The part where you wrote you hated me that night. My voice came out steady, which honestly surprised me. I keep acting normal, but that line keeps looping in the background. He leaned back, looked at the ceiling, let out a long breath. I knew this conversation was coming, I just hoped not tonight. He shifted, turning his body toward me fully for the first time. When I wrote that, I was furious and scared and felt invisible. He paused, jaw working once, then met my eyes. I was not calm, I was not balanced, I was flooded. He gestured vaguely toward the journal, then dropped his hand again. If I trusted myself to say that out loud, it would have softened. Hearing him admit that made something in my chest tense and loosen together. So what do you feel when you look at me right now? He studied me like I was a complicated case, not a spouse. Annoyed, he said first, which weirdly made us both smirk. Also guilty, also worried, and also still drawn to you. He shrugged one shoulder, eyes never leaving mine. It is not simple enough to fit in one angry sentence anymore. That answer helped and hurt at the same time, which is our theme. I rubbed my fingers together, nails scraping lightly against skin. I need you to understand what it did to me anyway. I swallowed, then pushed the words out before I chickened out. It made every casual touch feel fake, like you were rehearsing affection. He winced, shoulders pulling in like he had been physically struck. Yeah, that tracks, that sounds awful. He leaned forward, elbows on his thighs, hands clasped tight. I do not know how to fix that except keep showing up. Then he added something softer that I almost missed. And keep telling you when I am angry, instead of saving it for pages. That part felt bigger than he probably realized. Because if he actually followed through, the journal would lose its secret power. I can live with you being angry out loud, I said. I cannot live with you quietly planning your exit and calling it therapy. He flinched at the word exit, but he did not argue this time. I wrote about leaving because it felt safer than asking you to change. He tapped one finger against the journal cover, quick nervous rhythm. I was afraid if I told you how bad it felt, you would either crumble or attack. He looked at me like he was bracing for both right there on the couch. I thought about all the times I had done exactly that over smaller things. Straight up melted or snapped when he tried to bring up needs or complaints. It tasted ugly to admit, but that does not make it less real. I helped train you to hide the hardest stuff, I said quietly. That does not excuse you writing it down like a secret manifesto, though. He gave a short laugh at the word manifesto, then shook his head. That journal is exactly the opposite of a manifesto. He rested his palm on it, fingers spread like he was grounding himself. It is a trash can for thoughts I hate having, not a plan. He gestured toward his phone on the arm of the couch. If I wrote every raw thought about clients there, you would fire me. That example landed in a way his other explanations had not. Sometimes I jot down, I cannot stand this person during a tough session. He let his hand fall to his leg, muscles still tight. Then I breathe, figure out what that reaction means, and move on. I sighed long and slow, letting that picture settle. So the problem is not that the thought existed, it is that I saw it. He nodded once, eyes serious. And that I never gave you an updated version, he added. Which meant you got trapped in the worst snapshot while I kept walking. That was exactly how it felt, which annoyed me because he nailed it. I am still standing in that moment, and you are already past it. I pressed my hand against my chest, feeling my heartbeat trip. You moved on quietly, I stayed there alone with the words. And I used spying to drag myself through every other ugly snapshot too. He went still, absorbing that last part. Do you actually regret reading, or do you just regret getting caught? His question came out calm, but it hit hard. I took my time answering because I wanted to be precise this time. I regret doing it instead of asking you directly, and I do not regret knowing. He tilted his head, thinking that through. So the knowledge helped, but the root poisoned it. I nodded, my throat tightening for a second. If I had not seen how bad it was for you, I might have kept coasting. But reading it turned me into a cop, not a partner, and I hate that. We sat in silence a few beats, both processing our own trash piles. The timer on my phone ticked down in the corner of my vision. He looked at the journal again, then did something unexpected. He picked it up and set it between us, spine facing me. Ask me one thing from there and I will answer from memory, not paper. I stared at the cover like it might bite. You are serious? I asked, skeptical and weirdly hopeful. He nodded, hands now empty, resting on his knees. If we are going to stop letting this object run the whole house, yeah. His eyes held mine, steady for once, not sliding away. My brain sprinted through options, every horrible sentence I had memorized. I could have chosen the worst ones, twisted the knife a little. Instead, I picked something that had been stuck under my skin quietly. You wrote that Jenna thinks you are halfway out, I said. Do you still feel halfway out, or did that shift at all? He inhaled, chest expanding, then released it slowly. That phrase hit me hard because I knew she was not wrong. He rubbed one hand over his jaw, looking tired and clear. Back then I was already picturing alternate lives, apartments, other routines. He shook his head once, like he was comparing screens. Now I feel more like 1/3 out, 2/3 in on a bad day. He lifted one shoulder, a crooked almost smile ghosting there. On a good day it flips 2/3 here, 1/3 still terrified. It was a weird way to measure a marriage, but at least it was honest. And where are you on whatever scale you use? He asked. I had not put numbers to it before, but the question forced me to. Some days I am fully in and still waiting for you to bail. I twisted the corner of a cushion between my fingers, grounding myself. Other days I am half planning who I would be without you. I let the cushion go, hands open now. So maybe two scared people, not one villain and one saint. He nodded slowly, like that actually gave him relief. I can work with two scared people, he said. That is kind of my specialty, unfortunately. A small real laugh slipped out of both of us at that. The timer buzzed then, shrill and 2 on the nose. He reached over, tapped it off, but did not stand. That was 30, he said, glancing at the screen. Do you want to stop here or go over time? The fact that he asked instead of bolting mattered more than I expected. Let us steal 10 minutes from next week, I answered. I reached into the drawer under the table and pulled out a small notebook. His eyebrows lifted when he saw it, then he looked back at me. I started my own, I explained, feeling embarrassed and proud at once. Wanted somewhere to put my worst thoughts that is not your pages. He leaned in slightly, studying the cover like it was a new species. You wrote about me in there, he asked, mouth twitching. I shrugged, feeling my face warm. I wrote that I hate that I snooped, and I hate that you made me feel replaceable. And I hate that part of me still thinks control equals safety. He did not flinch this time, he just listened. Do you want me ever reading that, he asked. The answer came quicker than I expected. No, not as it is, not now, I said. But I can tell you about it like this when I am ready. He nodded, accepting that boundary without argument. Then maybe we treat these like laboratories, not court exhibits. He tapped his own journal lightly, then let his hand fall away. What goes in here is raw material, what you get is the processed version. And if something feels big enough, I promise to bring it to you anyway. Weeks did not suddenly turn dreamy because of one talk on the couch. We still messed up, still snapped, still stonewalled sometimes. The big difference was what we did after the explosions. He would walk into the room instead of disappearing behind a locked door. I would say, I want to check your phone right now, and then not do it. That last part took practice and I slipped once. His screen lit up while he was in the shower, name at the top. Jenna. My heart jumped, old instinct roaring back like it had never left. My hand moved toward the phone before my brain caught it. I froze with my fingers inches above the glass. A year earlier, I would have opened the thread without a second thought. Instead, I pulled my hand back and sat on the edge of the tub. When he walked out, towel around his waist, I pointed at the device. "Your supervisor texted," I said, forcing my voice even. He picked it up, looked at the notification, then at me. "Do you want to see?" he asked, offering it over. I shook my head, palms pressed together like prayer. "I want to trust you more than I want screenshots," I answered. His eyes softened in a way I had not seen in a long time. Later that night, he mentioned it without prompting. "I told Jenna we needed firmer lines. Home stuff goes to our counselor now." He stretched his legs out, feet nudging mine intentionally. She understood. It was not dramatic, just necessary. Hearing that made my shoulders drop about an inch. Our sessions continued, messy, exhausting, sometimes surprisingly light. We argued in that room, we laughed there, we sat in silence. The therapist pushed both of us, not just one, which we needed. On the drive home, we would debrief like we had left a strange movie. Some rides we took in silence, some full of sharp edges, some unexpectedly calm. The journal stayed on the nightstand, sometimes open, mostly closed. I watched him write now and then, pen moving fast across the page. He never hit it again, and I never reached for it again. Instead, I would pick up my own notebook and scratch out my chaos. Two separate books, two people trying not to weaponize their inner noise. The last big test came on some random Tuesday, not a milestone day. We had argued about something small that carried bigger weight underneath. He walked away to cool off, which used to mean vanishing emotionally. An hour later, he came back holding the journal, thumb keeping a place. "I just wrote a draft of what I almost shouted," he told me. He sat down across from me, spine straight, seriousness all over him. "I am not giving you the book, I am giving you the summary." He took a breath like he was about to dive. "I almost wrote that I regretted Mary. NGU, which is not true. What is true is I regret how I show up when I am scared." Something in me unclenched hearing that layered admission. He did not pretend the dark thought did not flash through. He also did not hand it to me raw and expect me to carry it. He owned the behavior underneath, instead of letting the dramatic lines stand alone. That was when I finally believed he was not hiding behind pages anymore. So where does that leave us now? We are still married, if you are waiting for that headline. He does not hate me every time I annoy him, and I annoy him plenty. I do not patrol his private corners, even when fear scratches at the door. We trip, we repair, we write, we talk, and some nights we just breathe beside each other. Sometimes I still think about that first sentence I was never meant to see. The one that detonated whatever illusions I still had about automatic happily ever after. There are days I am almost weirdly grateful for it, and days I wish I could erase it. But now when I look at him, I see the whole messy spectrum, not just that spike. And when he reaches for his journal at night, I reach for his hand instead, and we decide which one matters more in that moment.